Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. The Chinese expansion dream has been built on the remains of the flourishing civilizations that have existed for centuries. The dream to conquer the world has a heavy price to pay. East Turkestan, Tibet, Inner Mongolia, Ladakh, Hong Kong, Shaksgam, they have all witnessed brutalities, human rights crackdown, atrocities and ethnic cleansing of the worst kind to ensure that the Communist Party and the Han Chinese race remains supreme and flourishes, and while the rest perish. We at NewsX last year went ahead and drew this map on your screens, the real map of China as opposed to the one China claims to be its sovereign territory. The real map of China has spread far and wide. It has gone viral. We are highlighting it yet again on the 100 years of celebration of the founding day of the Chinese Communist Party. On this broadcast today, on the day China goes ahead and yet again put forth by force and tyranny and authoritarianism control over all these territories that it has taken over by force, by coercion, and the concrete action that needs to be taken to tame China, giving independence to the brutalized nations and reducing China to the paper dragon. It actually is the agenda of this entire discussion. Joining me on the broadcast, Professor Madhav Nalapat. We have gone ahead and put out this map. We are talking about the real story of China. And while the world at this point of time recognizes the fact, the brutal atrocities, the brutalities that have been faced by the likes of Hong Kong very recently, until last year, total control being given to Chinese mainland, the draconian national security law that has at this point of time been unfolded over there. Tibet, we have gone ahead and atrocities that are being witnessed. There's cultural cleansing that is taking place, ethnic cleansing that is taking place, replication of it all being witnessed in Xinjiang, in Inner Mongolia, East Turkestan, and there are protests after protests that we see every single day within these countries, within these autonomous regions occupied by China, and outside of it at the United Nations fora. And the NATO has raised the voices. There is G7 that is also at this point of time concurrently fighting for the cause of the human rights violations. Amidst all this evidence, how do we bring about China to admit for the fact the brutalities that it has gone ahead and brought about to these nations for the simple reason, simple cause of expanding its territory?
Megha, I don't expect the Chinese leadership, especially under Xi Jinping, to admit anything of the kind. And may I point out that NewsX's map is extremely accurate from the point of view of the territories that have been taken over by the Chinese Communist Party, beginning in the 1940s, essentially Xinjiang, Tibet, those parts of Mongolia, Manchuria, and very recently complete control, total control of Hong Kong. The only remaining items on their agenda are essentially Taiwan, and they are working very hard both inside Taiwan and from the Chinese territory. Then they would like to see the South China Sea, and they have succeeded in setting up a chain of all kinds of islands or so-called installations. And essentially the idea is to make it impossible for any shipping to travel through South China Sea without the permission of Beijing. And finally, we have the Himalayan Massif. I mean, let's not fool ourselves that all the Chinese are looking for is Aksai Chin. They are looking for much more. Quite frankly, they have been looking for Aksai Chin in the past. Today, in Xi Jinping's time, they're looking for these three conquests. And that's what Xi Jinping is hoping to do. And that's precisely why China has emerged as such a threat to so many countries in the world. Now, the advantage China has got, frankly, is that, and I must say, the NewsX channel has been very clear about what is happening. I don't see too many media channels, including in India, being similarly clear I mean, certainly not on the scale of NewsX or, pardon me for saying so, another medium that is banned in China, the Sunday Guardian. We have been very clear as to what is taking place, and what Xi Jinping is hoping to do is to conquer territory the way Mao Zedong did, and this time conquer territory, Taiwan, the South China Sea is entirely controlled, and the Himalayan Massif. And we have to understand that, and the world has to deal with that. For that, we have to form alliances. We have to form networks, not to wage war, but to prevent a kinetic war and to ensure that the Chinese and their associates, like, for example, Pakistan in the case of India, Russia in the case of the United States, that their associates and the game played by them is neutralized and turned back. So the point is, we need a clear understanding of what is the problem. We need a clear direction as to how we are to go from the higher command of our country, and we need a clear understanding. I mean, frankly, once we do that, it is very certain the democracies will win. But as of now, that is a long way from being completed. And meanwhile, General Secretary Xi and associates like President Putin are working very hard to consolidate themselves to be masters of Eurasia, then masters of the Indo-Pacific, before moving on to the Atlantic. So it's time the rest of us woke up. Your channel has woken up, I must say, and I congratulate NewsX. Those on this panel have woken up, but I'm sorry to say, not everybody has woken up.
Well, that's our mission at this point of time, to spread information and go ahead and debunk every single disinformation that China goes ahead and puts out through its state propaganda machinery. Major General Gigi Dwivedi also joins me on the broadcast, and we talk about the strategic and military importance of these territories at this time that have been brought under control by the Chinese Communist Party with the help of the People's Liberation Army. I'm talking about Shaksgam, I'm talking about certain parts of Ladakh, I'm talking about the Pamir Valley. These are locations that have been taken over by the Chinese during the several wars that have taken place along the line of actual control between India and China. The most important one, Shaksgam, perhaps crucial important one, because at that point you have the Belt and Road Initiative that is also going to push forth towards Afghanistan. It gives you a clear passage from China into Pakistan, and this is a serious worry. So the importance becomes manifold to go ahead and take control of that area, not to mention the Aksai Chin area that has been gifted by Pakistan to China back several years ago. These all are Indian territories, but at this time it's a misnomer that the world doesn't really go ahead and recognize it the way it is.
Well, Megha, I think we need to understand firstly a little bit about Chinese history, and then also the mindset of its leadership. You know, China was founded something about 5 millennium back on the plains of Yellow River, but it was unified only under Qin dynasty about 2200 years back. And Chinese history is replete that it's an expansionist power. So that said, that while heartland China was only what is about 1/4 of the today's China, but then they kept expanding as the various other dynasties came in. The Han dynasty was in power hardly about for 800 odd years. It's mostly other dynasty which has ruled China. Having said that, let me come to the point you raised about the PLA occupation and expanding its territories after the liberation or after the communist revolution. You know, Chinese have a mindset that for their growth and prosperity, they need to have a conducive periphery. So that is why Mao stayed away, first and foremost, started to consolidate the outlying states, that is Xinjiang, in the Inner Mongolia and Tibet, because until you had the good hold over these three states, the China's hinterland would not have been secure. And that is why they made the road linking Kashgar to Lhasa in late 50s. And that was the start point of a conflict with China, because they needed accession to have this road through. And at the same time, now how they have assimilated other territory. Now Shaks Gum, they took it from Pakistan because they know that the Kashgar CPET or the Karakoram highways passes from Kashgar, and they had to have some linkage on the ground with Pakistan, and that's the Shaks Gum Valley. And simultaneously, they have been eyeing Arunachal Pradesh because sovereignty is a very important facet of Communist Party of China. Sovereignty includes integration of all the territories which during the revolution they couldn't do. And Taiwan is top of the agenda. It is like unfinished agenda of communist revolution. And also South China Sea, and then also to be integrated, and that is part of the Chinese sovereignty as per se. So if I tell in a few points that Chinese constant effort is to consolidate the periphery, keep expanding, and the areas which are very critical to it, especially Ladakh is very critical. Certain parts of like Chumbi Valley, Arunachal Pradesh are very critical, and Chinese are not going to let it go. And their labeling and negotiating strategy is a work in progress, and we should not be fooled because Chinese larger aim is twofold. Firstly, to keep India under check, and secondly, keep consolidating its position so that they can always build pressure on us, be it Ladakh or be it Arunachal Pradesh.
Ambassador Suresh Goyal, the point of Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, I'm talking about these parts of India, and the sovereign nation of Nepal is the fact that it has already taken control of Tibet 50 to 60 years ago. Now that is the theory that has been put forth by Mao Zedong, that is the palm and the five fingers being denoted by Bhutan, by Nepal, Ladakh, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. And China continues to build its expansionist control over these nations, as have been these reports that have been coming out of these military camps that are being built, villages that are at this point of time being built, complete Hanization of these border states, and in Nepal also the kind of political intrusions and intervention it is going ahead and making to build a puppet government at the hands of PK Oli. How do we go about? We already know the agenda of China, and every single of the neighboring country of China is at loggerheads with the country, with the mainland. But they cannot, especially in the ASEAN region, raise a voice simply because they are too dependent. Or at least China has gone ahead and coerced its way into the maritime territories of these nations, gone ahead and taken control of their natural resources, and they are at the mercy of the Chinese. And only now has there been development with regards to the military action that is being brought about by America, Australia, Japan and other of these nations.
Okay, all right. I thought your question was going to Megha, 2 or 3 things here really. Firstly, I remember that in 1978 when I joined the Foreign Service, and we need to work on the desk as a part of the training for some time, and I had the privilege of working on China desk in 1979 for a few months. 1979, at that time, China had brought out an atlas. And in the atlas, though they showed the territories of China as they stand today, in the preface, there was a suggestion that Chinese influence, the Chinese territory, extends to all the places where Chinese have gone in the past. And we had a great discussion at that time, because by that definition, China would be able to claim practically the entire world as part of China, because the Chinese have gone to the USA. In the recent times, they have established Chinatown. But in the past, Chinese forces, China has been to Southeast Asia. They entered the northern part of India as travelers. So Chinese philosophy, Chinese sense of what they are is not just limited to the territory, even now, that they claim to have. They will not, in case they find it necessary to annex more geographical areas for their own political or strategic needs, they will not hesitate to justify it. Example, it is the case of those islands in Philippines, which they very conveniently occupied the island. And even though the ICJ had pronounced against the occupation, clearly indicating that those islands belong to Philippines, China refused to honor the verdict. So that is one point, first of all. Second thing is you asked me how to stop. The only way to stop China from this is to make it clear that the military occupation is not going to work. And it is from that point of view again that China considers India a threat, because India came in the way of Chinese expansion earlier in Doklam. And then again, the Chinese wanted to come to the East Ladakh and then patch up with the DOB. We did not allow that to happen. We came in the way, and we are now asking to vacate the territory they have occupied. So, in very short, we have to recognize China for what it is. China is an expansionary power. China is a country which will have no hesitation in annexing any territory in the neighborhood or elsewhere, which it considers useful to it for its own political and strategic purposes. And number three, being aware of all this, we have to be particularly cautious and defend our territory with all our might. In the case of India, using the military means, which need to be really, alert all the time. That's all I could say really at the moment.
Namrata, coming over here, taking forward the point that has been made by Ambassador Suresh Goyal that we need to utilize our diplomatic, strategic and military forces to go ahead and stop China from its expansionist agenda on our territories, especially, first of all, and then also go ahead and support the causes of the minorities. I'm talking about Tibet, I'm talking about Xinjiang, the Uyghurs over there, the South Mongolian region, the Inner Mongolian region. Hong Kong is already out of the hands and in, at this point of time, control of the Chinese Communist Party. And I would just like to make a comment over here and read it verbatim to what the President Xi Jinping has gone ahead and said in his message to the people of China and the Politburo. He goes ahead and says that it is time to build a strong military to defend the country, and he goes ahead and then warns that the Chinese people will never allow any foreign force to bully, oppress or subjugate them. Now these are the three terms that are ludicrously used by him, keeping in mind that it is the Chinese Communist Party that subjugates, oppresses and bullies dependent nations, smaller nations around its vicinity.
Thank you for the question, Mika. I think what you're saying about, yes, especially about the speech where he said that China will no more be bullied. I think China, again, is very good at building narratives, and they have built this narrative of 100 years of humiliation. And especially, when they had to suffer at the hands of the Western powers and the territories that we are talking about, all the territories, they claim that that is the time when, they lost all their territories. So here, another term which they have been using for a really long time and also now very aggressively is the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Now here comes in all these areas that we have been discussing, be it South China Sea, East China Sea, be it Taiwan, be it Arunachal Pradesh, or be it Ladakh. And they always repeatedly and assertively they have said that these are the areas that they had lost during these years of humiliation, and they will take it back. And the second thing is that because you're talking about the minorities, or you're talking about areas, especially Tibet, Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia, over the years, few policies before, of course, when Deng Xiaoping was there, they were at least not as aggressive as President Xi Jinping's, policies. And here I would like to point out the recent appointment that has been made on December 14, 2020 of Chen Xiaoqiang. He is a Han cadre, and he's been appointed as the head of the National Ethnic Affairs Commission, and they have broken this tradition after 1954. Ever since 1954, the head was always belonged to the ethnic minority. But for the first time, they have appointed someone who is a Han, which gives a clear indication that China is definitely not backing down when it comes to assimilating its minorities. Now, what the world can do, you see, there have been some changes, especially after the 19th Party Congress, after the US-China trade war started. There have been few changes. One of the changes that at least a few countries are responding, and one change is the Quad that we have spoken about on NewsX from time to time, and the Indo-Pacific strategy. Now you see many changes. The Czech Republic the Senate has actually boycotted the Olympic Games. G7 for the first time has mentioned Taiwan. Japan and US have signed an agreement that if China uses force against Taiwan, then we will retaliate. There have been positive changes. So as I think Professor Nalapat said that we need to, not military alliances, but yes, strategic alliances are very important when we, when we talk about China, because China is actually, it is not showing that much, but if you read Chinese language media, they are extremely disturbed by all these developments, especially by the Quad and Indo-Pacific strategy. They're also disturbed by the mention of G7. You see that right after that statement, we see the biggest air invasion of Taiwan that we had seen, the airplanes that went into the Taiwan, the territory of Taiwan.
Zone. Yes,
it's not that countries, at least few countries have woken up. They have started talking about it. They have started pushing back China. But of course, more effort is required.
Absolutely. I get your point. And Professor Madhav Nalapad, I'll come to you again. And keeping in mind the kind of wolf warrior strategy that has been adopted by the envoys of the diplomats in the international arena, and the nationalistic agenda that also is very, very aggressive within the mainland China amongst the people of the country. And that has been the push of the Xi Jinping empire for the past many years now. But there seems to be, a discord in the way the wolf warriors are going ahead and functioning in the international arena. China going ahead and calling itself, Xi Jinping himself going ahead and making a statement saying that, China is a benevolent nation. It needs to improve upon its soft power. It wants to go ahead and win over allies. And there's a complete disregard with regards to the kind of narrative that is being built domestically, because people over there continuing to be aggressive, holding on to the nationalistic agenda. And then in wake of the COVID attacks that have taken place across the world, at airports, Chinese nationals at this point of time looked upon with dubiousness, looked upon with some sort of scrutiny, is not really going down well for the Chinese people, for the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese mainland. So that is also a kind of discrepancy that China and Xi Jinping and the Politburo need to at this time handle properly.
Well, you're right, Megha. 2020 has been a turning point in international opinion regarding China. Very definitely, 2021 is only accentuating that trend. And in the next 2 or 3 years, that trend is likely to continue. A decoupling is definitely going to take place. Whether a lot of that comes to India or to other countries, we have yet to see. It depends on the policy structure, and frankly, it depends on the alliance structure. And I, from the very beginning, have been saying an alliance, if it is to be useful, has got to be comprehensive, and that very much includes the military aspect. You can't have an alliance without that. I quite agree with the general that our soldiers are perfectly capable of ensuring that the Chinese get rolled back in any aggression. But I think American logistics, for example, and naval, help from the Quad countries, Air Force, for example, would be very helpful. American equipment and logistics. If that were to flow, I think it will frankly be a very important force multiplier for our military, for our gallant soldiers, and I'm totally in favor of that. I want to point out there's something that all our panelists are agreed about, and that is that, look, we are now under a threat that frankly is different from any in the past, because General Secretary Xi Jinping apparently believes that China is now strong enough to achieve this dream that they have been talking about, as a matter of fact, since 1949. You had Mao Zedong building what we thought was sufficient, more than double the territory of China. That the NewsX map makes that clear. Mm-hmm. And now you have Xi Jinping talking about an even greater China, which completely dominates the entire Indo-Pacific, and very soon an alliance with the Russians hopes to dominate the Atlantic. And frankly, I mean, from what we are seeing from published comments and what we are seeing from their speeches, they seem to believe in this. And in large part, they're also acting in an extremely aggressive direction. As far as India is concerned, well, I think, we definitely are involved in a comprehensive war with China, and I think the United States is involved in a comprehensive war with China. Countries in ASEAN are involved, countries in Europe are involved, and all of us need to come together and to meet this common threat.
Absolutely.
Now,
you make a strong point over there.
Frankly, the GHQ and its subversion in India is being put on steroids by China. Just as China is putting on steroids Russian subversion in the United States. So this is happening in front of our eyes, and we need a strategy that is not reactive but proactive, as others here have been saying, and we need to work that out, the details of that, finalize it and implement it yesterday.
Absolutely. That has to be done at this point of time. We already have a Quad. It is just on the brink of being formalized. Military alliances is something that need to come together. We need to see that the South China Sea, that has witnessed a lot of commotion in the last several months, India needs to participate over there as well to showcase its heft against the Chinese Communist Party's agenda of expansion and taking control of the navigation waters over there. And then, like my panelists have gone ahead and said, Eurasia, and then the Pacific region, and then we take a look at the Atlantic region, and then obviously going ahead and targeting the United States and taking the crown of the world power is the dream that Xi Jinping and his Politburo goes ahead and dreams. On that note, I slip into a short break, come right back, because going ahead and discussing much more with regards to the Chinese expansionist agenda, what all ways it will stoop down to take control of the entire territories that are adjoining mainland China, and would not stop at going ahead and putting forth propaganda against everything that it has been facing with regards to the devastation that has been witnessed and experienced by the entire world.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.